everybody, this is your coach Andrea Dickerson here with IOwnADaycare.com, and I want to welcome you to today's training that is powered by the Jumpstart Blueprint course. The Jumpstart Blueprint course will offer those of you who are looking to start, grow, and manage a successful childcare business. It will offer you my beginning systems, steps, mindset, forms, documents, procedures that I had to put in place in order to help me grow my business. This week we're going to focus in on Module 4. Module 4 is all about planning your finances. A part of Module 4, you'll discover what is a budget, the startup budget, the cost per child, creating your rate sheet, and setting up your business contract. Today's free training, I want to help you discover how to calculate your cost per child. So as you will notice, as a part of this training, you'll get a video. The video includes your worksheet. Your worksheet is where you would enter data that you would derive from your blueprint. Once you enter the data that's derived from your blueprint, the data automatically enters into the format. So there's no calculations or anything that you have to do with that. The formula has already been pre-calculated. For today's training, I want to give you a sneak peek within the actual module workbook. This is what we title as the blueprint. I'll walk you through understanding your cost per child. So many people say, how much should I charge? How much do you charge? What's your going rate? Or we say, oh, they charge too much, or that's too high. But we really need to look at the cost that's included in providing a particular service to a child. So I'll walk you through understanding what you're looking for as in revenue from your childcare business, clues on when you're overspending on useless items or underspending on useful items that create a fiscal dilemma. You'll also discover what happens when you experience a budget crunch. There are times in my very own business where I have to reassess my cost per child. I have to reassess my spending, reassess what's going on around me, because at times things can run differently than other seasons. Additional costs that we have to take into effect is personnel. One of the first steps so many of us as childcare business owners like to do is to cut back on personnel. But what happens when we cut back on personnel is we begin to cut the most important cost in our business, which is making sure that we have qualified people on our team to help us continue to grow even when things aren't as plenteous as we are used to. The next step is setting up your child care contracts for increasing profits. I'll take you through a few examples of what I need for you to understand when it comes to calculating your cost per child. As a matter of fact, let's move on down within our blueprint and let's get right to the business of calculating cost per child. The first idea of calculating cost per child is to understand that you are utilizing slots times a weekly rate. Now, several of you may be set up differently. Some of you are set up where you only charge them by the hour or by the day. Well, to keep life simple for you and to create contracts that would be enforced in the courtroom, you want to consider your packaging. How are you packaging your childcare services? Are you packaging it where you can offer clients a weekly rate and expect for this to be included in your budget? The next one is, as we go into, should you charge co-pays or full rates? You want to be clear as to what's direct cost and what's indirect cost in your business. Whenever I create worksheet that includes a sale. I think about the direct costs and the indirect costs and where my business will be affected if I don't ask for the full price of caring for children, and how long my business can take the discount rate from clients for what particular time. So here we go. Pricing is an art, not a science. There is no one formula you can use to price your childcare services. However, there are 3 components for pricing your childcare services that you should know. Number 1, cost, your reserve, and the market. Let's go over this. What will it cost you to operate? That is what your cost per child calculations will give you clarity on. Number 2, the reserve. Amount left over after all your expenses are paid. What does your business profit after all your expenses are paid? And then number 3, what are your competition charging? Several of us like to be comparable to the market, and we like to stay within our means and not rough the market. But to be honest, so many childcare business owners, especially in my area, we charge way less than what we should because we're trying to keep the children coming through the door. And that's all well and understood. But when it comes to you setting the standard, please understand your market and what your market can support you with doing. So let's look at the direct cost worksheet. Direct cost worksheet are your food expenses, your salaries, your operating days, the number of children you have enrolled, which will equal your cost per child for the first section. Your staff salaries should include only your teachers, teachers' assistants, and floaters. As you increase the number of children, you will hire more teachers and pay more in wages. When you have 5 children, you will need fewer staff than when you will have 75. This number does not include your director's salary or your assistant director's salary. The director and assistant often need to be hired and paid from the day you are opening, no matter how many children you care for that day. These are indirect costs after all expenses are paid. So direct cost is what you will occur in your business the moment you start caring for children. Indirect costs are costs that you will incur in your business whether you were caring for children or not. Before you got your license, you had to have lights, water, phone, and an administrator on staff before you opened up your doors to service your first child. Maybe you had your lease, your mortgage. All of those are indirect costs, which means you will incur that cost whether you're working with children or not. So this is why it's so important to separate those 2 costs, indirect cost and direct cost. The next step, the owner's salary, the director's salary, the assistant, your payroll taxes, benefits, your accounting, office supplies, training, business development, insurance, equipment, your loans, your mortgage, your monthly marketing costs, your roof, your AC, your toilet, any repairs, lawn, any monthly subscriptions. Like a lot of times we have to do our fingerprints, vehicle gas, lights, water, cable, camera systems, your savings, any other expenses. Those are what we call indirect costs. So those are going to be needed to be calculated separately. Then there's the formula. The formula is where you take your indirect costs and you divide it by the total cost by month, which is 4.3. And when you get your workbook and you go into your training, it will be more in depth. But once you take these 2 numbers, you work these 2 numbers together, you arrive from your charts for your direct and indirect costs to determine what your minimum price per child should be by using this formula below. So here's the formula. Take your indirect costs per week. Next, divide the number by your license capacity. Take your number of leasing slots, right where you are licensed for and what you've calculated for your estimate number of costs. So then you have your indirect costs per week divided by your estimate number of slots, plus your direct costs per week, food and teachers. And once you take that number, it equals the minimum amount needed per week. So you have to divide indirect by direct, which will equal the minimum amount of needed per week. Once you look at that, you can start doing step 3, which is creating additional streams of income. But just for clarity's sake, I just want to make sure that you are clear, because I did get a little unclear in my thoughts as I was teaching this part of the lesson. So I just want to clarify. You add up your indirect costs, then you add up your direct costs. Once you get all of your costs, you divide it by 4.3. Once you divide it by 4.3, that lets you know how much it costs you per week. Then you take your and divide how much it costs per week by the number of children that you are licensed for and or that you have enrolled. Once you take that number, you only use about 85% of that number. Never budget at 100%. So then once you use 85% of that number, that is the amount of what it will cost you per week to take care of children. You do that for indirect, you do that for direct. And you take and you add those two numbers together, and this is the minimum amount that you would need in order to meet your overhead, meet your expenses for the month, and cover your cost. So when you look at what it costs you to care for a child, then that will open up your eyes to create additional streams of income and how you structure your deals, your rates, and your contracts. Now, to get a more in-depth training, I really recommend that you join us with the Jumpstart Blueprint course. This is the paid course where you get 9 modules plus the operational forms. When you get into this course, your video will walk you through how to create your cost per child, and then your blueprint will give you the form so that you can make a copy and create your cost per child as often as your business shifts. All right, you guys, this is your coach, Andrea Dickerson, here with IOwnADaycare.com. Thank you for joining us for this mini course training on your cost per child. This is brought to you by Jumpstart Blueprint course. Join us in the training. You'll be so glad you did. Bye, you guys.